Eric, welcome to the show, man. How is it going today?
It's going well, Brett. Thanks so much for having me.
So tell us a little bit about that journey for you.
Yeah, so it involves a lot of burnout. So I think that's pretty common for many of us as medical professionals, but I can go way back to some words that were spoken to me on the recess playground playing kickball in Iowa in the early 80s. I was told that I wasn't good enough to play. And so because of that, I took those words and said that I was going to be so good at everything that I ever did that no one would ever not pick me. So basically I formed this broken soundtrack in my mind, and I lived on that for a lot of years. So nothing that I did was ever good enough for me. It wasn't good enough to be in the top 15 in my dental school class. I had to be in the top 10. It wasn't good enough for me to start running. I had to do marathons. Triathlon wasn't good enough. I had to do Ironman triathlon, mountain climbing, all of that stuff, in addition to being in a very, very busy practice. And so what that did is, when I never thought I was good enough, I ended up running myself into the ground.
Do you also own the real estate, or do you rent the real estate?
Yeah, so I own the real estate, own the practice. Part of me working so hard, so crazy hard, I was in a good position when I was ready to sell the practice. I was debt free. So own the real estate outright, own the practice outright. I was flush. So that gave me more options, which was great.
Yes.
It was really good. But when I started talking to to Jeff, who is now my partner, he was in another practice, and I said, well, I want to sell you part of the business, and I'm going to hang on to the real estate. And he said, hey, I'm leaving a good thing as well. So if I'm coming, it's a burn the ships moment for me, and I want half of everything. So my practice management consultant said, no way, Eric, you cannot do this. You can't go 50-50 on somebody that you've spent less than 10 hours of time total with. And I looked at him and I said, Matt, I was going to sell and walk away completely. If it doesn't work out, that's still what I'm going to do. So currently we are both 50-50 owners in all of it, and it has just been fantastic. So basically the book is about strategies for inflow. How can we better take care of ourselves? But even before that, how can we be very aware of where we are? Because what we do is we lie to ourselves. We tell ourselves that on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 is completely empty and 10 is completely full. We tell ourselves we're a 7 or an 8. We're not. We're probably a 3, 4, or a 5. But if we keep operating as a 7 or 8, we're getting drained, we're getting drained, we're getting drained. And that's when we start feeling burnout. And burnout's one of those words that I think a lot of people are burned out on hearing the word burnout. But there's a spectrum of burnout. Maybe you're overwhelmed, maybe you're torched, maybe you're just bored with how life is going. There's a whole lot of different ways to say that. You don't really have to be to the point of having panic attacks, chest pain, heart palpitations, all of that. Your life might just be kind of gray. You might not be able to find any excitement in your life anymore, which is another sign that you're getting burned out. So basically the book is just a manual for better living, for self-awareness, and how to take better care of ourselves.
Have you sought out psychologists to help you reach those moments of self-realization?
Mostly I've spent a lot of time in quiet. I just have spent a lot of time in quiet, a lot of time journaling. I see a number of therapists in my practice, and so I'm always talking about things with them, proof of concept, ideas that I have, affirmation from them. I fortunately have great relationships with most of my patients that have been forged over a long time, so we can have those level of conversations. I do work with a mentor. I have my own coach, and so it's just a lot of those discussions, being deep in relationships and not being afraid to be vulnerable. I think where we're at right now, a lot of people are extremely isolated. They don't have much of a network. And so when we're alone with our thoughts and we don't have other people to process those thoughts with, life can be pretty scary. And so I think it's super important that we have people in our lives who can help us walk the journey. If you don't have those people, the cool thing is you can see a therapist, you can get a coach, you can get one of those relationships fairly easily. You just have to be willing to be vulnerable and be honest about where you're at. And that was one thing that I just knew I needed to do right away, was be honest about my journey.
How in the world do we maintain an abundance mentality when we're living lean?
Yeah, so, well, it depends if you're living lean, if you're forced to live lean, or if you're just trying to live lean to get out of debt.
If you're living lean because that anchor is holding you down.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is learning to live in the present moment. Okay, so oftentimes we're either stuck in the past or we're worried about the future. And so we miss the present moment. Not everything we do has to cost a lot of money. And so in those times when we're trying to live really lean, what are some simple pleasures that can really get us from thing to thing? So it would be great to have a whole bunch of vacations. But if you're in that season where you're trying to live really lean, maybe instead you go camping for a weekend. Maybe instead you just set up half a day where you can go hiking and do something that doesn't cost a lot of money. Maybe you even just set up a time to cook a meal together over the weekend and sit down and watch a movie and really just be present and enjoy that. So I think there's this lie that we keep having to spend all this money to get all these experiences, when we have all these simple experiences that are available for us that don't have to be very expensive. And then we start looking at the world differently. If we can get a ton of joy out of a pizza and a Sunday night movie, then we're not going to need to spend as much money trying to get all of these experiences. It's great to do that. Believe me, I love it. I love to be in the mountains. We travel a lot. But during that time, we had to find joy in a lot smaller pleasures than those big things.
How you evaluated the business in order to come to that sale price, right?
Yeah, so I had a practice valuation done. And so I used my practice consultant, and I paid him, and he came up with a practice valuation. Mm-hmm. And then also had the latest real estate appraisal. So those were really the two big numbers that we put together in figuring out the price.
Nice. And there was the way that practice valuation was set up. And I'm new to all of this stuff, but it's interesting to me, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners, going through this for the first time or considering it in the future, that EBITDA is this basically a printout of your finances, and then there's sometimes a multiple placed on that to create this value. Did you dive into that, or did the consultant explain that process with you?
He did. So he did 3 different valuations based on 3 different strategies, and then we averaged out those 3 valuations is okay. How we got there. So based on production and collections, number of active patients, lot of data. I'm sure thankful that I could pay him to do it. I did some of my own checks on my own, used some other formulas that I could find online just to kind of compare where he was coming from, and it all kind of lined up in the same area.